To me, it's an art piece. I mean, a car is an art piece, and I just think tastefully displayed, I think love for cars is amazing. So, yeah. So what is it like? What does that mean to you, though?
About this car specifically?
Yeah, I mean specifically, and then what it kind of
and
like.
Then overall.
Yeah.
So for this car, it's sexy. It's got curves on it. They're not jagged edges. It flows. Driving it, it's tight. It's tight like a race car. And yes, I've driven a race car. I mean, it is tight like a race car, but yet it gives the comfort, that I could just drive it up here, just for the day, just to go out and have some fun. But the overall, passion started as a kid, and I mean, I've passed that on to my kids. They're both involved in cars. They have old cars. My oldest works, in the industry, restoring classic cars, and quite honestly, he's worked on new cars too. But today, as I was waiting for you to get there, I was sitting there watching, and I watched a number of father and son combos walking in, and the son going, "Dad, look at that car. Oh, Dad," and the dad 100% in it. I don't know if the dad liked cars or not, but his son does. And so it was important to his son, so it was important to him. And I think that type of commitment to your kid helps them develop, whatever passion it is. Today we got to see it in cars. I mean, of course I highly encourage that. But it was really neat to watch that.
No, it is amazing. And I think, I think as a kid, there is something that happens as some impression you get of a car that makes you love cars. And I'll tell you mine, and maybe you have a story. I always liked cars. I grew up in a small town, so I wasn't exposed to that many really exotic cars or anything. And I was around 12 years old, and my neighbor, who lived at home with his family, went out and bought a 86 944 Porsche. And I'd never seen this before in my life. It was red with black leather.
Wow.
And he pulled up, and the sound and the look, but more so than anything, there was something that just, I can still to this day smell it, is opening the door, and it had the black leather with the manual transmission, the Blaupunkt stereo, and just sitting in that thing, and the smell of that leather in that 944, it impacted me and left an impression on my life. And I became a car person after that. And he was out every Saturday hand washing his car, and I just sat there. Meanwhile, I went on to have my first car of a 1980 Cutlass Supreme that, if you let go of the steering wheel, took a hard right in the middle of the highway. But that's another video.
We've all been there.
Yeah. So, two questions.
Yeah.
What was your first impression car? And if you could have any car for free, what would it be?
All right. First impression car. And this is funny because you'll get a kick out of this. It was a Chevy. It was a Chevy, I think it was a 67 or 68 Chevy Impala. And my uncle owned it. And he had headers on it and no mufflers, just straight pipe.
Okay.
And I remember being in the car. My first memory of it is me being in the car and him starting it. And it was a little scary, because I'd never heard anything that loud. But then that scare went away, and it was, I love this sound, the smell, just all of it. And so it's not so much that he got me into cars, but it was that first impression of, holy cow, I got to figure out what's this all about. And then just, over the years, we grew up with a guy that was in drag racing, and he ended up having a pretty bad accident and retired from professional racing. He was on the NHRA circuit.
Oh, wow.
And for a long time, he had one of the top times in the books. But he had a shop, an engine building shop here in Houston, Conrad Racing Engines, if anybody remembers that. But he's since retired. But I used to go over to his shop just to smell the car smells. You know, there's gas and there's I can't even remember all the different just smells. I mean, it was just great, and it felt good to be in there, you know, because you're around a lot of cool stuff, and that's where I took Mason, our oldest. That was his first trip there. He was about 3 or 4 years old, and I remember carrying him in. And we walked into the shop around the counter, and he took a deep breath. He just goes, ah. And Eddie said, he's hooked. Yeah. And I said, yeah, he is. He is. So anyway, that's that story. But as far as what car, you know, no cost associated with it.
No cost.
Man, I mean, the list is so long.
I know, it's so difficult. It's a difficult question, actually.
It's really hard. I mean, honestly, Ford GT, the F40, Ferrari. Yeah. I mean, those are, well, Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah. How about that? I didn't do that on purpose. Yeah. But something like that. Right. I mean, just so ridiculously, insanely built, purposely built for going fast. If I had a car that had essentially no speed limit, that'd be the best car. Right.
I think like for most of us, I mean, I speak for us probably, but I think a car association with things, impressions make such a big difference. So, you know, I remembered that 944. It was my dream car. When I had saved up enough money and had a real job, I went to buy one and look at it, and I drove it, and I was just like, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave the memories in my mind for what I think it was, because it just was different, because technology kind of changes your mind a little bit about what you become used to and what you like. Sure. But I have two cars probably that are just, I mean, I have a million cars that I would love to have, but a white Testarossa because of Miami Vice. Yep. I mean, that would be like amazing, right? Yep. I remember looking at one time and asking a guy about it, and you know, this was back when they weren't crazy priced. They were so expensive, but just not like they are today. They weren't crazy. And I talked to him about it, and then he was like, I'm like, what about the maintenance? Like, what's the maintenance on it? And he's like, oh, it's not bad. You just got to replace the water pump. And I'm like, oh, how much does that cost? And he's like, oh, it's like $60. I'm like, that's not bad for a Ferrari. Yeah, but you have to take the whole engine out to get to it. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then the other car, which I have a pretty cool story. So I was in San Antonio, and when I travel out of town, a lot of people know this, like I love going to car dealerships just to look at cars. You know, I like to see what they have and what's on the lot at the time. And I went to the Porsche dealership there, and I walked in the door, and they had this car that I saw in all the magazines that I never had seen one in person. And it was just sitting on the showroom floor, and I went up to the guy, and I'm like, why I was asking him this, because there's no way in a million years I could afford the car. Was asking him about the car, and you know, had some questions, and he was nice enough to entertain me. And he's like, yeah, we just got this in. It was a special order, Carrera GT for Tim Duncan. And I'm like, that's real cool. They said, unfortunately, he came in here and he could not get in the driver's seat. And I got in it. He let me sit in it. I could barely, the dash comes way down, and then it has that huge center console, kind of like the Corvette, the C8, but it was just different, you know, and it was just a cool story that car, but I still to this day think that car is one of the most amazing art pieces and masterpieces that Porsche has ever built. So that would be probably a car that I would have to go for if it was gifted to me for free. So we all want a car like that gifted to us for free, right? Yeah. I wouldn't mind
that Diablo that we saw today. Yeah. You know, that white Diablo. I mean, we had the posters as kids growing up. I mean, that's Yeah.
So those are, I mean, again, all these cars that kind of we grew up with, live in our memory, and that's what kind of makes us car enthusiasts, right?
Yeah.
So you have a cool story with this car, amazing story, history, and it finally all came to fruition.
It did.
So, and that's why I want to do this video with Chris, and that's why I posted with him too, because he was kind enough to let me share my fandom of just cars in general with him purchasing this car and how it all went. But now to see it here in person for the first time, it's pretty amazing. So,
Thanks.
All right. Well, that's it for the detailed image, and we appreciate it. And thank you very much.